Hello everyone and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, The Lost Planeswalker, and this week I wanted to tackle the question, is Sol Ring still the best mana rock? Sol Ring was created all the way back in Alpha, and since has consistently been one of the most powerful mana rocks around. Sol Ring's power comes from its ability to be played on turn 1 and provide a consistent mana source the entire game. The power of Sol Ring can be seen as it is banned in almost every format. Commander is the format that Sol Ring is most popular in, and even with consistent reprintings every time a new Commander deck comes out, it still averages about $2 or more. I'm going to look over several different mana rocks and rate them based on how early they can be played, how much mana can be generated from them over a 10-turn period, and the type/amount of mana generated each turn. So let's start out by using Sol Ring as our first example. Sol Ring can be played on turn 1, so it gets 5 out of 5. With any Commander game lasting on average 10 turns, you can generate about 20 mana over that time, so it gets a 4 out of 5. And Sol Ring gets another 3 out of 5 for producing 2 colorless mana, but it's only colorless mana. Overall, it has a rating of 12 out of 15, which is pretty good. While Sol Ring provides 2 colorless mana each turn, some decks rely on playing cards with more than one mana symbol, and some other artifacts that produce less mana are actually more powerful in decks like that. Next, let's look at another common mana rock in Commander, Arcane Signet. Arcane Signet can be played on turn 1 or whenever you have 2 or more colorless mana available, so it gets a 4 out of 5. Arcane Signet can generate between 9 and 10 mana over a 10-turn game, so it gets a rating of 3 out of 5. And Arcane Signet can produce any color of mana that's in your commander's color identity, so it gets a 3 out of 5 for its versatility. With an overall rating of 10 out of 15, Arcane Signet is not as powerful, but its ability to produce mana equal to your commander's color identity is still one of the more powerful 2-drop mana generators we have. Let's take a look now at a very expensive mana rock, Mox Diamond. Mox Diamond can be played on turn 1 by discarding a land and can be used right away. This can give you 2 colored mana on turn 1, which can be very powerful, so it gets a 5 out of 5. Because it can be cast on turn 1, it will be able to generate 10 mana by turn 10, so it receives a 3 out of 5. Mox Diamond can be used to generate mana of any color, which is very powerful for whatever deck you're playing, so it gets a 3 out of 5. Mox Diamond is a card only accessible to a few individuals who can really afford to play such an expensive card. This makes it not really realistic when building a deck because it can cost more than a 100-card commander deck. With an overall score of 11 out of 15, it's one of the best mana rocks around. Looking at a less expensive but not cheap card, Mana Crypt is a more accessible mana rock to those wanting to spend a little bit more money. Mana Crypt can be played on turn 1 regardless if you have land in play or not, so it gets a 5 out of 5. Mana Crypt can generate 20 mana over a 10-turn period, which is very good, so it gets 4 out of 5. And Mana Crypt only generates colorless mana, but at a rate of 2 every time it's tapped, so it also gets a 3 out of 5. Mana Crypt gets its name for a good reason. One way or another, this card will deal a lot of damage to yourself over time. With an overall score of 12 out of 15, this is not a card to shy away from. Our next card has a much higher casting cost, but with big benefits. Chromatic Orrery. Chromatic Orrery is a 7-drop card and is cast later in the game on turn 7 or whenever you have 7 mana available, so it gets a 1 out of 5. Chromatic Orrery would be cast at the latest on turn 7 and can still generate 20 mana by turn 10. It allows for that to be used for mana of any color to cast spells and gets a 5 out of 5. Chromatic Orrery taps for 5 mana but allows you to use that and all your other mana as though it was any color, so it gets a 5 out of 5 for versatility in mana production. Chromatic Orrery gets a respectable 11 out of 15 and only has the disadvantage that it's going to take much longer to get out and benefit from. But by the time you do, it might be too late. Moving on to another iconic mana rock, we have the Talisman cycle of cards. There are 10 of these talismans with 1 for each 2-color pair. The talismans can be played on turn 2 or whenever you have 2 colorless mana available to cast them, so it gets a 4 out of 5. Next, since they can be played on turn 2 at the latest, they can produce either 9 or 10 mana by turn 10, so it gets a 3 out of 5. And finally, the talismans have a small amount of diverse mana production, with either a colorless mana or 1 of 2 colored mana for 1 life, so it gets a 2 out of 5. The talisman cards are good to be used when your mana base is suffering. In decks where you play 3 or more colors makes these cards cards better to use. Later in the game, when life becomes more valuable, paying life to cast your spells becomes less desirable and gets a rating of 9 out of 15. Now, one card that might rival Sol Ring is Thran Dynamo. Thran Dynamo costs 4 mana to cast, or can be played whenever you have 4 or more colorless mana, so it gets a 3 out of 5. If Thran Dynamo is cast at turn 4, over the 10 turns, it will generate 21 mana, and that gets a 5 out of 5 for being able to do so. Thran Dynamo also creates 3 colorless mana, which isn't as versatile, but can be used to great advantage every turn and receives a 4 out of 5. Thran Dynamo is not a cheap mana rock to cast, and will take up your entire turn 4 to cast, but you will start to build benefit from thereafter. That 1 extra mana you gain over a Sol Ring or a Mana Crypt makes this card almost as powerful, with a score of 12 out of 15, which ties them. Looking at another 4 mana cost mana rock, we have the Golden Throne. This is a card from the Warhammer 40,000 Commander decks, and is worth picking up a copy of. The Golden Throne can be cast at latest on turn 4, so it gets a 3 out of 5 for being cast so late. The Golden Throne can create 21 mana over 10 turns if it was cast on turn 4, and gets a 5 out of 5 for its mana production. And the Golden Throne has a leg up on almost every other mana rock because it can create mana not only of any color, but of any kind in any amount. This versatility can make it so you have color correction you need to cast almost any spell. For this reason, it gets a 5 out of 5. This mana rock is not made for every deck. Because you have to sacrifice a creature to get that mana, it might not work for everyone who needs it. But in a deck where this works, it really works good. With that being said, I've rated it at a 13 out of 15. Looking at some of the cards, let's see how these artifacts compare when laid out against each other. If we're comparing the turn we cast mana rocks, the cards that are cast on turn 1 take that victory. Under the amount of mana produced by turn 10, this goes to the artifacts that can produce 20 or more mana, specifically Chromatic Orrery getting the slightest advantage over the other mana rocks at 20 mana because it generates so much mana over such a short period of time. And the unique mana production goes to the cards that can make more than 3 different types of mana at once. And overall, we get the Golden Throne as our winner with the high score of 13 out of 15. The amount of diversity and the ability to help mana fix decks of any color or any color combination puts it just above Sol Ring in its versatility in decks that need all different kinds of mana. Let me know if you agree with my judgment and whether or not you agree with my rankings overall in the comments down below. If there is a mana rock I left out, please feel free to rate it based on my chart and let everyone see how it compares to the cards I listed. If you found this video helpful or would like to see more of my videos, I would appreciate a sub to my channel. And as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.